Welcome to the Stormwall Shadowstitch cast on crit Inquisitor. This build is a beautiful defensive hybrid life and energy shield matrimony thanks to Shadowstitch, Corrupted Soul, and Pious Path. These three combined allow us to easily hit very high EHP along with substantial sustain. After defenses, our build grabs offense with the combination of Stormwall and the new Battlemage Ascendancy passive for the Inquisitor to give our phys spells a high amount of flat added phys along with full conversion that nicely works well with the new overpowered Trinity support gem. After these mechanics come together, we grab the broken combination of Bladefall and Bladeblast. That should have been nerfed multiple patches ago, but somehow seems to skirt past the gaze of Chris and his righteous nerf hammer. But instead of being a run-of-the-mill basic Bladeblast, Bladefall, self-casting peasant, we throw cast on crit into this build for that high-quality spin-to-win lifestyle. This build can be done on a relatively mid-range budget and brings home some high-end results, so far helping me defeat the Maven along with the new deadly multi-uber boss encounter, the Feared. Now let's go in-game and break down the build bit by bit. Welcome to the in-game portion of this guide. Now I'm going to go over gear, passives, the gem links, the works. To start off with, before I get into the gear, I want to say I'm trying to keep this guide as budget friendly as possible. I didn't end up min-maxing this gear to some crazy unaffordable extent. I'm thinking I have some ideas of how to do that in my head to go next level, but I don't really want to take the time to craft all the gear. I started to craft a little bit better belts, and of course my first Valor Orb I bricked it, so I was like, you know what, I don't want to spend all this money min-maxing something that's already able to do all the end-game content. I want to put out the guide so I can keep it budget, keep it nice for you guys, and then later in the league, if I'm fiddling around and want to go min-max this, I do have an idea of my head and how to take it to the next level. But it's pretty good now, and it's also a lot more affordable right now. So I figure put out the guide while it's affordable, make it so that way you guys have a much easier option of gearing to get to the same point I am in this video. Now, to start off with the gear, the Stormwall. This is a very cheap item. No one really uses it, no one really cares about it, so I was able to get a 6-link for like 50C or something, or 30C, I forget. You can buy a Storm Heart that's 6-linked and use the Prophecy, a 1C Prophecy, to upgrade it to a Storm Wall. If you cannot get a 6-link, if this ends up skyrocketing in price, simply drop Trinity support here. Your main single target is based on your Bladeblast anyways, so dropping some single target on your Bladefall won't be the end of the world. You'll still be able to clear packs very easily with it, I think, without Trinity support, and you'll generate the resonance you need with Bladeblast anyways. So if you get this as a 5-link, don't worry about it, don't sweat it, that'll be a-okay. Getting you a Jeweler's Touch will get you there quickly. After that, besides the Stormwall, other uniques to this build, we use Shadowstitch. This is one of the more expensive items in the build. because it's completely dependent on you getting corruption chambers to create it. You have to take normal sacrificial garbs, not rare, not magic, normal, and you need to double corrupt them. It's a 1 in 4 chance you create a Shadowstitch. On market right now, they run around 1 to 2x or much higher if they have really good implicits. They're guaranteed to always have 2 implicits. I just got one that had good rolls on it and an okay implicit of damage for 2x. I was happy with that. An important stat to look at when these things is, or one important stat to consider, is the minus number to all res. If it says -5 or -6, that could lead to another -10 all res or -20 all res. It makes gearing a lot harder the higher that stat is. So when you're shopping around, that's one of the important stats I'd look at. Try to get one with -4 if you can. And that's pretty much it. Making these garbs, if you're trying to do it yourself without using a, without buying it, I'd recommend getting yourselves the Atlas passives for Alva here. Essentially what they allow you to do is, if you're upgrading a corruption chamber that's level 1, you have a 50-50 chance to go straight to tier 3. So that makes you get tier 3 a lot more often. And then here, with contested development, you essentially can upgrade a room at the last minute. Say you get to your last incursion, and it has the option to upgrade a room to a tier 3, and the other option is to give you a corruption chamber, or a corruption room. Instead of going to corruption room level 1, it'll go straight to number 3. Same if you're going from 1 to 2 on a room. If you pick the corruption chamber, it'll go from 0 to 2. So these are very valuable. Run incursion missions in Glennick Carns if you want to get yourselves more reliable corruption chambers. Can highly recommend. Okay, now after the Shadowstitch, after the Stormwall, great unique is the Inward Eye. I just recommend getting a decent roll. If you can get a good enchant on it, I'd recommend something like Cyclone Attack Speed or Bladeblast Area of Effect. Those are 2 really good rolls to go for. And then on top of that, you'll notice all my gear is corrupted. I should mention this now. When it comes to corrupting your Stormwall, corrupting your Inward Eye, corrupting your boots, gloves, all these items can be corrupted, guaranteed to not brick if you use a Krasic Vassal. It's like a couple C beast. You can buy it on trade. They're not too rare either. You probably could farm them in Einhar missions. And simply it allows you to guarantee corrupt items to 30 quality and not brick them. Because your jewelry, you can't do this. You'll see here, I have multiple bricked items. I got very unlucky. It's a 1 in 4 you brick your item pretty much, and I hit it the first try on every single one of these items. And for my rings, the most expensive item in my build, I hit it 3 times in a row. So you can get very unlucky with your Val Orbs. So the way to reduce the amount of cost in the build is to use these beasts, guarantee 30 quality corrupt onto your pieces that aren't jewelry, and that way you don't have to worry about bricking these things. Another great way to avoid having a bricked scenario is buying a Talisman. I recommend looking for stats like life, percent energy shield, crit multi, spell damage, chaos res, other resistances. All those stats are really good, and then just look for a decent okay passive in terms of already anointed on it. There's a lot of really cheap good talismans on the market, and I highly recommend looking, shopping around for it, because this talisman, I think it only cost me maybe 20, 30 C, I can't remember. It wasn't too expensive, and it's really a pretty high value amulet for me. Gets me a lot of crit multi, helps the build out a lot, and you don't have to worry about the scenario where you brick your item. So can recommend just buy a nice amulet or a nice talisman on the market, and you'll get some good bang for your buck there. For rings, I would say don't do what I did. What I did here was very expensive. It has the nice benefit of making me stun immune to spells, because I have both a Shaper and an Elder Influence, and then I get the spell damage from Mark of the Shaper as well. But really, the amount of cost I put into creating a custom double influence ring and then corrupting it, missing it on brick 3 times, really wasn't worth it. That's up to you if you want to take this risk. Really what I'd recommend is get yourself an Assassin's Mark on hit ring, try to craft a little bit of a resists on it, and then just get yourself another nice ring with life and resists. Stuff like that is what I would recommend going for, because this really was a lot more expense. It adds a little bit of damage, but it's ultimately unnecessary. For example, I do Uber Adziri with Sibyl's Lament. I swap it in, and it's still plenty of damage to do Uber Adziri pretty consistently. I simply swap in Sibyl's Lament, and then I grab myself a Soul of Yugal right here to get another 25% reduced reflect. Between that and the ring, I have 105% reduced reflect damage, so I don't take reflect. And even though I'm losing all the damage from Shaper, or Mark of the Shaper, and I'm losing the ability to be stun immune, to spells, it doesn't really matter. I still have enough damage to do Uber, not Uber Shaper, Uber Itziri, and it works fine. So definitely would recommend, don't necessarily do what I did here. Go for a little bit more budget-friendly rings, because when you're valuing your jewelry, there's always a chance it bricks, and if you start going for the ultimate expense route, it can cost you a whole lot. If I got it on the first ring, you know, I would have only been like 5x deep. It wouldn't have been too bad. But missing it 3 times in a row, having to create 4 rings, 4 Awakener Orbs, reroll for crit multi 4 times, stuff like that adds a lot of extra cost, and I can't really recommend it from my experience, because it felt terrible to put 40x into one gear slot just because I was going for min-maxing the ring. Later on, this will be cool when I'm min-maxing. If I decide to go and do a super min-max version, it'll be nice I already have this ring created, but ultimately I think it's unnecessary for the build. After that, for your belt slot, really what I'd go for here is an Elder Leather belt. Go with pristine fossils until you hit good percent life, flat life, and then go for just okay resistances and corrupt that. It shouldn't be too expensive to get that sort of okay level of belt. And then hopefully if you break it a few times, it isn't that big of a deal, but it'll make a big difference. I went to try to create a pretty high-end belt because I was thinking, you know what, I'm going to do some min-maxing. And of course it bricked, and I was like, you know what, screw min-maxing. I'll look at min-maxing this build later. My ability to brick good items is unfathomably high. So besides that, as for the belts, or the boots and the gloves, for boots, I'd highly recommend getting yourself a regen enchant. I was lazy, I didn't go buy a Crazy Vassal. I was going to upgrade here to have the regen enchant, but I was like, you know what, I just bricked my belt, there's no way I screw up my boots, and I Val on +2 aura, and because of that, if I wear these boots, my resistances aren't capped like they were going to be, and so, again, I couldn't upgrade my boots there. So just get a Crazy Vassal, get regen, get yourself life, get yourself movement speed, and decent resistances. Don't necessarily do what I did here, and just YOLO Val. Definitely get yourself Crazy Vassals, don't take the risk. For gloves, I'd recommend getting gloves with accuracy. I should also mention accuracy would be a great stat on your amulet as well as in your other ring, because I feel like I was a little low on accuracy. I had 2600 accuracy. I think getting this closer to 3k, 3.2, 3.3 will feel much better for the amount of hits you're going to proc and the amount of crits you're going to proc. So definitely would recommend getting the accuracy a little bit higher by getting accuracy on the amulet or your extra ring slot here. So it's a very important stat, and you have it on at least 2 pieces of gears would be preferable. That plus some decent ES. If you get yourself some life gloves with res, accuracy, and then craft on ES or something like that, this is a great pair of gloves. Get you a nice amount of ES and a nice amount of life and res and accuracy as well. So I believe that covers the gear slots here. Now let's go on to flasks. Flasks, I always recommend an enduring bleed flask for your mana flask. It's very easy to keep up your bleed immunity if you have it on a mana flask like this. Would highly recommend. For the second flask, for the most part, I didn't even use Bottle Faith. I didn't start using this until I had done a bunch of feared fights where I dropped a few Bottled Faiths, and I was like, you know what, I have an extra one, I'll put it in the build for the funsies. But I think Itziri's Promise would be really what you want to use here. It's a very cheap, very powerful flask. We're not using Avatar of Fire, so it's very advantageous. Would recommend this flask. High-end, Bottle Faith is great, but seriously, for all I know, Itziri's Promise at a high roll might even be more damage than Bottled Faith based on how much crit we already have in the build. I'm not quite sure on that, but definitely use Itziri's Promise here. Bottled Faith is super expensive, and Itziri's Promise is very good. Not only does it help us with that, it gives us Leech, and on top of that, it would give you much better Chaos Res. I'm at about 12 Chaos Res. If I was using this when I fight Chayula, I would feel much safer. He's one of the most dangerous people for me in the feared fight when he goes into his Cyclone. If I had the extra 35 Chaos Res here, I think I'd have a much better time tanking his Cyclone. As for the next flask, Diamond Flask, this is super critical. It takes your crit chance or effective crit chance from a 60, a 70 to a 90, 100 range. You know, it gets you much closer to very, very consistently critting. Would recommend a Diamond Flask. After that, we go with the Roomies for defenses. It gives us armor, and it gives us a lot of block. These are huge, huge defensive flasks. Would recommend this. And last but not least, of course, is always an Adrenaline Quicksilver. You want that move speed. It just feels so, so good. There's a few things I realized I didn't cover, one of them being gem links. Okay, so when it goes to gem links, it's Bladefall, Link to Cast on Crit, Link to Spell Cascade, Cyclone, and Trinity Support and Conk Effect. Of these, drop Trinity Support if you have a 5 link. After which, our main damage support is Bladeblast, linked to Divergent Inspiration. You will need this if you're going to be able to cast Depending on how much mana you have reserved, you're probably going to need this to be able to cast Bladeblast. The extra reduction in mana cost with Divergent Inspiration is really a go-to. After that, Control Destruction, Link to Elemental Focus, Link to Trinity, and Awakened Increased AoE. If you don't have Awakened Increased AoE could be the play. You might not need this. Maybe you could get away with like Hypothermia or another damage support, but I'm not quite sure you'd be able to. The overlap you'd be losing without increased AoE might be too much. Not 100% sure on that. I haven't tested anything else, just had Awakened AoE, so I went with it. After that, we have Precision, Link to Immortal Call, Link to Cast when Damage Taken, Link to Hydrosphere. This is just so we get a -10 exposure on enemies with Hydrosphere. There could be other options, and proccing Immortal Call is also nice for some extra tankiness in the build. But I think Hydrosphere is a great choice to get some extra -10 because we're dealing mostly lightning and cold damage, so to have an extra 10 pen on those elements is really pretty nice. After that, we have Second Wind, Link to Enduring Cry, Link to Flame Dash, and Urgent Orders. This is so that way while we're doing a fight, if we get hit, we can proc Enduring Cry, which gives us an additional 2,000 life and ES regen all over the course of 1 second. It's a huge amount of extra sustain. It gives us endurance charges. Really would recommend it. Just if you ever take hits in a fight, it's a great way to sustain and bring back that HP. And then Flame Dash, just for the mobility of it, is really pretty good. I'm going to check on the little guy. I just set him down to play after he's been sleeping, but he might be hungry now, so I'll be back. After the boot links, our last support setup is Flushing Stone with Vitality, Link to Zealotry, and Enlighten support. We have a level 4 Enlighten. It's kind of expensive. I would recommend just getting a level 3 and then getting a little bit lower level on your Vitality and your Precision, and your, Precision right here. That will make you reserve less mana, and it'll make up for the fact you don't have a level 4 Enlighten. It'll save you a lot of budget there, because level 4 Enlighten is pretty expensive, and to lose a little bit of levels on Vitality and Precision isn't too big of a deal. So that's what I recommend there. Let's talk Playstyle of Build. So when it comes to this build, it's all about clearing with Bladefall, just cycloning through packs, flame dashing to the next pack, cycloning, that'll drop your Bladefalls, that should kill and clear packs. And then when it comes to bosses, that's when you break out the Bladeblast. Essentially what you'll do is you'll start out, basically dropping Bladefalls by cycloning on the boss. Once you get a decent amount of blades on the floor, you pop a Bladeblast, and then you start cycloning again. Now what you can do is you can start cycloning, drop some blades, drop a Bladeblast, start cycloning again, and as you're doing it, that Bladeblast will continue to chain off those additional blades on the floor until it's reached its max number of blades it can pop. You'll see the Bladeblast popping, and once they stop popping, that's essentially when you go, okay, I need to pop another Bladeblast, and you pop another one, keep cycloning, pop another one, keep cycloning. That's basically the playstyle you're going for, and it should work pretty well. Get a feel for it, get an idea of what feels right, test out different methods on bosses to see how to get as much Bladeblast damage out of it, but that's basically what you do. It's not too bad. Alright, now let's move on to the passive tree. To start off with, the Doriani's Jewel. This is very cheap this league thanks to the new Vaster Keystone. You put it over here, it'll give you Corrupted Soul. Ideally, you'd get a notable over here that's decent. Like, there's life notables, there's regen notables, there's some good stuff over here you can get. If you shop around and get a decent Doriani's that gives you a good notable here, that'd be the most ideal case. Otherwise, just getting some random Doriani's that has Corrupted Soul on it will do you just fine. And it's called the Glorious Vanity, by the way, but you need to make sure it says in the name of Doriani. That's way it will give you the correct keystone here. As for Cluster Jewels on the tree, the most expensive portion of Cluster Jewels, I mean, the mediums are pretty cheap, to be honest, but Overlord. It is very nice for getting Fortify, but getting an Overlord with 3 notables is a bit expensive. What you need to do to create this jewel is buy a jewel that already has Overlord on it, or alt spam for Overlord until you hit Overlord. Once you have Overlord, just a single notable, you can regal the jewel, or you say you're buying a jewel that's already rare with it. Basically, regal it, make it rare, and then buy remove non-attack, add attack crafts. These crafts are actually a lot cheaper end of harvest crafts. You can buy them anywhere between 20 and 60 C generally. They're not too bad, and they're pretty much guaranteed to hit notables. The only other attack non-notable they can hit, I believe, is attack speed on the suffix, which is lower weighting than the suffix notables. And that'll give you multiple notable jewels. Really what you just are looking for is Overlord on the travel passive, and that'll give you very good uptime on Fortify because you're always fortifying with your Cyclone. After that, for the medium clusters, I'd recommend 1 Overwhelming Malice. It's very high uptime that we have Unholy Unholy Might, which is an extra gain 30% phys as chaos, which is another nice damage boost. And then I'd recommend using that with a magnifier is a great option. And for the other cluster jewel, I went with Savage Response and Precise Retaliation. You could also do Magnifier and Towering Threat for your second medium here. All those options work really pretty well, and they're not too expensive. You can buy these sort of double cluster mediums for around 20-30 C. At least that's what they were when I checked the prices, or when I bought mine, basically. As for jewels here, I went for a strength accuracy one, just to help us get more accuracy into the build. If you already have good accuracy, say you got accuracy on your amulet, on your ring, and your gloves, and you don't need this extra 300 accuracy here, you can always swap this out for a jewel with res, percent life, crit multi for spells, stuff like that will be good for damage. But for right now, I went with strength and accuracy here because one, strength is my lower attribute, so that way I get crit chance from it based on the Inquisitor Ascendancy, and two, the accuracy is necessary for us to hit things. After that, for jewel slots, you generally want to go for phys damage, life, global, crit multi for spells, and resistances. Those are the main stats you want to look for. So you'll see that for a lot of these jewels, I have crit multi for spells, or crit multi for fire, I should say. That's because previously I was buying jewels for elemental hit, and I never changed them out, but really all I'm just going for is life and resistances, or life and crit multi. Depending on how many resistances you have, you might be able to go for some crit multi for some extra damage. So that's really what I recommend for your rare jewels. As for your Watcher's Eye, I have a regen crit multi precision. Other great notables or other great Watcher's Eyes affixes you can look for are gain life on hit vitality, a flat... No, they don't. I don't think flat life regen vitality exists anymore. I'm not sure exactly. I think that one might be gone. Attack speed precision. A pen zealotry would be good. A crit chance zealotry would be okay. Basically, look at the auras you have going on and go for some decent stats that'll help you out. Life recovery rate, vitality would be decent as well. So that's what I'd recommend for the Watcher's Eye here. I think that should cover everything on the passive tree here. Now let's go ahead and look real quick at the Ascendancy. For the Ascendancy, Pious Path, I gotta be honest, I think this is probably my new top pick for best Ascendancy node in the entire group of Ascendancies. I think being able to double your life regen and get ailment immunity and have lingering effective consecrated ground is just such a massive powerhouse of a node. It's the way we get such great sustain, and we can build so hard into hybrid life ES. This thing is massive, and I'd highly recommend it. One other thing I should quickly mention is with Corrupted Soul, is it splits the damage between your energy shield and life. This means that you get full benefit of your life regen and your energy shield regen because you're splitting that damage equally. So say I take a 5,000 damage hit, 2,500 will go to life, 2,500 will go to ES, and I'll be regenning them both at the same time. So you get full effect of this extra regen, and it is massive. Would highly recommend Pious Path. After that, Righteous Providence gives us over 300% crit chance. This node is huge. It got so much power. It gives us so much crit. Would highly recommend. And then last but not least, Instruments of Virtue. This is why we're able to build around Stormwall. It gives us the Battlemage perk, which means with Stormwall, we get another about 400 flat phys added to our Bladeblast and our Bladefall. This amount of flat phys is like a 60% more damage to a level 21 Bladeblast. It's a huge amount of damage. All these nodes are absolute powerhouses. Can wholly recommend them from the Inquisitor Ascendancy here. So that goes over Ascendancy, that goes over gear, passive choices for bandits, or for before bandits, I should say. For Pantheon, you want to get Soul of Ralakash, cannot be blinded. I realized this was a huge problem when I fought the Azanath's lady in a 5-way. She blinds your character, which means you basically don't crit because you just keep missing. Getting this passive is huge. One, it makes you take less damage from bleed, and two, it makes it so you don't get blinded and you're not going to get heavily destroyed by enemies that blind you because you're immune to blind. On top of that, Soul Solaris, I think, is the best defensive Pantheon with the ability to take no extra damage from crits. If you've taken a crit recently, this is huge in boss fights like the Feared, where you're getting hit quite a bit with big hits. If one of them crits you, the future crits won't kill you type of deal. feels very good. The 8% reduced elemental damage if you haven't been hit recently is also huge. And then the other nodes on it are also good as well. I just gotta say, Soul Solaris has really won me over this league. It's very strong. And of course, I mentioned before, if you're running Uber Ziri, just swap to Soul of Ugul before you run Uber Ziri. I do every time I run Uber Ziri just to get the Reflect immunity plus the Sibyls, chuck it on, and that way you can run it Ziri without fear of killing yourself to Reflect. At one point, I forgot to put this on, and before I even got to the split phase, I killed myself to Reflect because we just hit too hard, too fast. So you definitely need Reflect immunity if you're gonna run Itziri. Even if you're avoiding the split clones, you will kill yourself to just hitting Itziri herself, because she does have like a 1% Reflect, and that was enough to pretty quickly kill us. So definitely make sure you're doing the Reflect immune when you're doing Uber Itziri and Itziri. So I think that pretty much covers all the gear pretty well. I think I went over passives. Just going over my checklist. Oh, for bandits, we helped Alira for the resist and crit. Very good choice there. If not, you can go for 2 passives, but really I'd go with Alira because the crit multi and all res are really high value for us. So I think that covers everything. And I hope you guys enjoy the guide for this character. I had a blast playing this one. It was very effective at taking down the endgame content without too much investment. So I'm hoping you guys will enjoy it as well. And, oh, I forgot to say one very important thing, and that is Spell Cascade, Awaken Crit, Awaken Spell Cascade, and Cast on Crit. So this is another factor of I want to save you guys a lot of budget in this build. Awaken Spell Cascade versus Spell Cascade. For these, I ran all the clips in this video. You'll see I ran with just Spell Cascade level 1, and the damage was fine. I couldn't really tell too much of a difference. I think maybe the single target's a little bit higher with Spell Cascade, because the idea is the closer your Bladefall blades are together, the more likely your Bladeblasts will all overlap on the same target. Awaken Spell Cascade feels a little bit better for clear. The clear feels fine with a regular Spell Cascade, though. So this is kind of a don't get Awaken Spell Cascade. It's way overpriced. It doesn't give much to the build. Would not recommend it. Another thing is Awaken Cast on Crit has value, and that value is getting to 14% cooldown recovery rate. There is a threshold, a breakpoint, if you will, at 14% cooldown recovery rate. Awaken Cast on Crit is very expensive. What is cheaper is getting 14% cooldown recovery rate on your boots. This is the route I would recommend going. Get yourself a Shaper or Crusader pair of boots with 14% cooldown recovery rate, and then you can just run Cast on Crit. You'll hit the breakpoint, and really that's what I'd recommend, because this is a lot more expensive. Once you go for min-maxing, then I'd recommend going for Awaken Cast on Crit, and then you can have another suffix on your boots. But until then, I would just go for some CDR boots in your crafting process, because I think that's going to be cheaper than buying Awaken Cast on Crit. There's another breakpoint all the way at 52% CDR, but our attack speed really doesn't get high enough, and frankly, you have to invest in cooldown recovery rate on your belt, on your boots, and on the Awaken Cast on Crit, which that's a lot more CDR to hit. So just remember that 14% CDR on the boots if you're not running Awaken Cast on Crit. Now, I think that should have covered everything. Hopefully you guys appreciate the guide on this one. I hope you have as much fun as I did being able to run a lot of the endgame content, be able to run stuff very tankily. You'll notice my EXP bars at 0, because I still would die 1 to 2 times every time I did the feared fight if I ran into some Uber Itziri Flame Blast or did some stupid things. The reality is, those bosses, they hit really hard. I've done it deathless a couple times, but most of the times I did it, I died at least once or twice on running the magic and stuff like that, and if I ran them rare, they'd be a lot more rippy. I still did one rare with 100% gain phys, and I think some other damage mod, but it was real sketchy, and I'd recommend running those fights as magic with mods that don't screw over the build type of thing. So, anyways, I hope this build is good for you guys. I hope you enjoy playing it. I hope it takes you far into the endgame. This is one of the strongest builds for the amount of budget I've put into it that I've played, and I would highly recommend it to you guys. Anyways, appreciate y'all taking the time to watch the video. You have an excellent rest of your day, guys.